Hey there, people. So today I'm bringing you my All Minions guide, aka Summoner Weapons guide. I'm going to tell you how to get all of the summoning staffs, which are best. I'll talk about a little bit, because that's sort of debatable. And I'll be covering all platforms. I'll tell you which are available on which platforms and so on. I am not including sentry summons in this video. That's kind of a bit of a different category, so I will cover those in another video. But let's talk about minions. So minions are invincible and they follow the player until the player dies or either cancels or replaces the minion. All minions are summoned using staffs. I've got a bunch lined up here. And they cost 10 mana to summon. It's a one-time, you summon each minion, costs 10 mana, and then the minion follows you until you die, basically. The use time for the different staffs varies a bit, but doesn't really matter. Only 4 of these are actually available on 3DS. There are 9 on the other pre-update platforms, and there are 13 on the updated platforms. So the 3DS only has 4, again, only has the Slime Staff, Pygmy Staff, Raven Staff, and Tempest Staff. I will get into the details on those, and otherwise I will split them up. Basically, the ones that are exclusive to the updated platforms are late game ones entirely, so I will talk about those at the end, those 4. So the best modifier for nearly all of the staffs is Ruthless to maximize your minion damage. The mythical has a couple other stats, but the only thing that the mythical modifier gives you is better knockback, which isn't really that important for your minions. So generally you'll want to modify these for the Ruthless modifier. The one exception actually is the first that I'm going to talk about is the Slime Staff. Some say that mythical is better there because of rounding the damage works out the same. So let's talk about the Slime Staff, and I'm going to talk about the pre-hard mode ones first here, the early game staffs. So the Slime Staff summons a baby staff, or a baby slime minion, and this cute little baby slime minion does 8 summon damage. It is actually the rarest general drop rate in the entire game, which is why you may not have seen it if you haven't played a whole lot, unless you were very, very lucky. It's a drop rate of 1 in 10,000 from regular slimes and slimed zombies. Those are the ones with the blue slime on their head. That drop rate is 1 in 7,000 on an expert mode. It can also be gotten as a 1 in 8,000 drop from sand slimes, or a 1 in 5,600 on expert for those, or a 1 in 100 from Pinky. Of course, Pinky is a very rare enemy, tiny little pink slime. That's 1 in 100 or 1 in 70 in expert. So the only thing about this slime staff, slime minion that's remarkable otherwise, as you can see actually, if oh no, actually, I think it's only when it's actually attacking. It will actually hit the dummies as well, but the weak damage of this slime can actually be a benefit if you use it with a lucky coin as a money farm. So you can actually use it as a money farm even into hard mode. But generally, it's very unlikely that you'll get this early in the game, and it's really only useful otherwise early in the game. But let's show you what it can do. There's a piranha. And yes, it can kill a piranha, one of your early game enemies. So yes, it can do that. But it's pretty weak and not that useful as a minion, particularly because it's very unlikely you'll get it. But let's move on to the second one, the Hornet Staff. The next 5 are not available on 3DS. I will mention when I get to the ones that are. The Hornet Staff summons a Hornet Minion, does 9 summon damage, and can actually inflict poison on your enemies. It is crafted, and I will be crafting this one, from 14 beeswax, because I didn't have it already, so I did have the material, and here we go. Let's just go ahead and craft that 14 beeswax, which you get when you defeat the queen bee. So early game, you're not likely to be using a lot of summon weapons until you defeat the queen bee, at least, or you get down into the underworld. We'll get to that in a sec, but this Hornet Minion, as you can see, it's a hornet, and it does 9 summon damage, and basically it will chase enemies and shoot little stingers at them. So you can see it's actually pretty effective early in the game. Boom, boom, boom. and you can see the poison being inflicted on that piranha as well. So it's actually reasonably effective, and the first one you're most likely to get, because if you're going to play as a summoner, you'll want to defeat the Queen Bee to get the first summoning armor as well. But moving right along, the Imp Staff is the last of the 3 that you can get in pre-hard mode. Summons a small imp, and he flies around you, does 21 summon damage by firing 3 fireballs that can light enemies on fire. So there you go. You can see that damage is clearly increased there as well. Those fireballs, however, cannot travel through water, but they can pierce multiple enemies, which I believe the Hornet Stingers do not. So it's kind of a trade-off between the two, and in fact, a lot of people say you might want to mix and match them a bit. If you're going underwater, the Imp's not going to help you out a lot, but the Imp Staff is crafted from 17 Hellstone bars at your anvil. And that's it for pre-hard mode already. But let's move along into hard mode. The Spider Staff is one of the earlier ones that you can get in hard mode. It summons a spider which latches onto enemies, does 26 summon damage, and it can inflict the Venom debuff, a more powerful version of poison basically. It can also climb up background walls like the spiders that you encounter in the game. So it would be able to climb up and down here. And it actually only counts as 3/4 of a minion towards your minion cap, and that's something as well. I have this bewitching table, which will allow me to have a second minion, and I also, there are other accessories. Basically, you can eventually get up to, 11 or more minions with the right armor and accessories, which is what makes being a summoner worthwhile, getting lots of minions. But you can also use summon weapons and minions, and even some of the buffs like this one to have a couple of minions, even if you're not playing as a summoner. So it's still very useful even if you're not actually a summoner class. So the Spider Staff is crafted from 16 spider fangs at the anvil. It's a regular anvil. So I'm going to craft this one as well, because again, I actually didn't have this one, but I did have the materials. So there we go, Spider Staff. Let's bring it out. And that's what it looks like. It's just a tiny little spider. Now if I climb up here, it will actually climb up those background walls, but as you can see, it can fly as well. So it makes very short work of that, which is why I have these. Once you're in hard mode, you'll have things like mimics. We can team up, bring a few of them out. And you can see they latch right on and do continual damage, which makes them reasonably useful. But moving right along, we'll get onto the Optic Staff. I had already crafted this one. I did use this in my own playthrough. The Optic Staff summons a miniature version of the twins. So I'll dismiss my spiders. There we go. Oh, that's the wrong one. Optic Staff summons the miniature version of the twins. One attacks by melee, one fires lasers at your enemies, but they both count only as one minion. They do 30 summon damage. The lasers can pierce, but will max out at 6 hits per second per enemy because of the way piercing works. So you can have a giant cloud of these, but there's a point at which it becomes less worthwhile because you can only get 6 hits per second with the lasers on your enemies. The Optic Staff is crafted from 1 black lens and 2 regular lenses, plus 12 hallowed bars and 20 souls of sight at the hard mode anvil. So that will be a mithril or a calcum anvil. The souls of sight come from defeating the twins, so you will need to defeat the twins to get these guys. But you can see one dashes at the enemies and the other one fires lasers. But in combination, they are pretty effective. And that's the thing about minions and the summon staffs, that different ones will actually be useful in different situations, which makes it kind of hard to talk about which are best. You may want to use them in combination. You'll want to use different ones in different situations. Obviously, these ones will target flying enemies better than a lot of the ones that are based on the ground. The spiders can actually jump pretty high, so they can do all right. But the next one we're going to talk about is the pirates. And these guys are basically effective on the ground mostly. They don't jump that high. They dance around and get stuck a little bit, but they do pretty good damage. So the pirate staff summons a pirate character. Obviously, there are 3 versions, so you can see they look different. sometimes. But they're all the same effectively. They do 40 summon damage, and they basically just charge at enemies and hit them with a sword. So very effective on the ground, not that effective up in the air. So you can see, more effective against slower ground-based enemies and so on. And anyway, the Pirate Staff is fairly rare. It's 1 in 2,000 chance to drop from regular pirates, or 1 in 100 from the Flying Dutchman, both of which are during a pirate invasion. So it's pretty good if you're fighting. It's very good against like invasion events. Those guys will do a good job against the ground-based enemies, but up in the air, fast-moving up in the air and so on, they might not be so good. So let's move on. I'm going to talk about the Pygmy Staff next, and actually the next 3 are the other 3 that are available on 3DS. So Pygmy Staff is available on 3DS. All the other ones I've mentioned, all of these up until the last few, are available on all other platforms. Pygmy Staff summons a Pygmy character, little Pygmy. Again, you can obviously summon a bunch of them, and they have a few appearances as well, 4 different colors with slightly different masks and stuff. They actually throw spears instead of attacking directly melee. They do 34 summon damage. It's a 1 in 4 chance to drop from Plantera in normal mode, 1 in 2 actually. You have a 50%, half and half chance in expert mode, 1 in 4 in regular normal mode. On the updated platforms, they've buffed them a little bit, and they have a chance to inflict poison and venom only on the updated platforms. So you can see those spears, pretty quick, pretty effective. I think mimics, if I recall correctly, might be immune to that poison and venom. But yeah, you can see it being inflicted on the shark there. So yeah, these guys can actually be pretty effective, even against flying enemies, because they throw those spears. So they're pretty good, actually. They're quite reliable. They even inflicted, I think, venom on one of the dummies. But obviously they don't attack the dummies, which is why I had to set up these statues. But moving right along, let's talk about the Raven Staff. The Raven Staff summons a raven that flies at your enemies and basically just swoops down and attacks them directly. It does 37 summon damage. It's dropped by the Pumpkin during the Pumpkin Moon event. It's a fairly low drop rate, and it's variable. But you can see they can be very effective. Again, depends on the situation, depends on the enemy. They don't fly all that fast, so that's a factor. If you're, dealing with really fast-moving enemies, they might not work out that well. But they do fly, so they can go after flying enemies and so on. Pretty decent. And last but not least, for all of the non-updated platforms, will be the Tempest Staff, which is generally going to be the best one in the non-updated platforms. It summons a Sharknado, which fires shark projectiles, fires purple sharks as projectiles. It does 50 summon damage. The Sharknado will follow you around. It will also move, though, to intercept enemies. And as you can see, when it runs into dummies, the Sharknado itself can cause damage directly, as well as the projectiles it fires. So let's have a look at those. But you can see the downside to this is that it's not that accurate, and the actual Sharknadoes themselves don't move too quickly. So again, it's a bit situational. This is the most powerful one on the non-updated platforms, but it's not that accurate, so there will be situations where you'll still want to use one of the other ones, or you might want to use them in combination, and so on. And that is a drop from Duke Fishron. It's a 1 in 5 chance that you'll get that when you defeat Duke Fishron. So let's talk about the ones that are on the updated platforms, and I'm just going to quickly swap these in while we're talking. So the first one is the Deadly Sphere Staff, first one I'm going to talk about, and that summons a Deadly Sphere, which is an enemy actually that's exclusive to the updated platforms, the Deadly Spheres that you fight during the solar eclipse. And yeah, there are actually 4 shapes that this will show as, and as it attacks enemies, it will rotate between those shapes even. It flies around, it hits the enemies, does 50 summon damage. It's a 1 in 40 chance or a 3 in 80 on expert mode to drop from those deadly sphere enemies. So let's have a look at it in action. You can see it dashes quickly at the enemies. Reasonably effective, but as you can see, not like perfectly accurate either. So it's kind of an upgrade. Rumor has it these tend to have a tendency to get stuck sometimes, but it's a good weapon, obviously. But moving right along and getting into the absolute best ones, the last 3. The Xeno Staff, I would say this is the 3rd best. It summons a tiny UFO. It's very cute, but besides being cute, it's very effective as well, because this UFO will teleport around to chase enemies and will fire lasers at them, generally at short range. It does only 36 summon damage, which is lower than the last 2 I talked about. But despite that lower damage, it supposedly never misses, and because of the teleporting ability, it gets around quickly, it attacks quickly. You can see it shoots those lasers quickly, and it really took care of that minion quickly. So this is basically the first one, or the best one that you can get before the endgame lunar events. The Xeno Staff is very effective. It's a 1 in 9 chance to drop from Martian saucers during the Martian Madness event, which again is exclusive to the updated platforms. But that is, you can go through the Martian Madness event before the actual endgame stuff and get this, and it's very effective to get you through some of the other stuff. That event is post Golem, so it is still going to be late game, but there you go. Anyway, talking about the last 2, the best 2, and which is best is situational, really. The Stardust Cell Staff and the Stardust Dragon Staff. So let's do the Stardust Cell Staff first. It summons Stardust Cell, which is a smaller version of one of the enemies that you fight when you're fighting the Stardust Pillar during the lunar event. And the Stardust Cell will teleport around and fire little mini cells which attach themselves to the enemies, and each mini cell can do up to 30 ticks of damage before it goes away. And they will attach multiple mini cells to your enemies, apparently up to 10. And yeah, you cannot even see it against that. So there you go. There's those mini cells attaching to those enemies, and it will attach up to 10 of them to do a ton of damage. The stated damage for this is 60, but the effective damage is around 40 damage per second per mini cell, and up to 10 cells means up to around 400 DPS, maybe better total. Again, your accessories and so on can affect that. And they will also sometimes fire an extra little shot when you're attacking an enemy. They'll just fire a little shot at them as well. The Stardust Cell Staff is crafted from 18 Stardust Fragments, which you get from the Stardust Pillar, so you do have to defeat the Stardust Pillar during the lunar events to get those Stardust Fragments. 18 of them at your Ancient Manipulator, the glowing thing over here, will get you that Stardust Cell Staff. And this is very good against like large groups of enemies and stuff like that. Obviously, again, you can get a ton of these. They'll dart around, they will teleport as well, and they can take out a lot of things quickly. But one thing that can take out certain things quicker is the Stardust Dragon. So as you can see, Stardust Dragon does contact damage, flies around you, and obviously it's just one thing. It does not teleport, but it will move a little quicker when it's pursuing enemies. The thing about this is that each additional summon, instead of being another dragon, actually lengthens your existing dragon. So I've got some summoning potions there just to add a little more. So, you can imagine having like 10, 11, 12 segments on this thing. It's going to take up a larger area. It's going to be able to cover a larger area. So the more times you summon it, the bigger it gets, the more effective it gets, the more damage it does as well. So Stardust Dragon basic stat is 40 summon damage, but again, each additional summon adds a segment, increases its area of attack and its damage output. Basically, it just keeps getting longer, and it can attack 10 times per second. It actually will manage potentially thousands of damage per second, up to tens of thousands of DPS. But it is most effective, as you can see, again, because it doesn't teleport around. It moves relatively slowly. It gets most effective against slow and large targets, so it is very good against bosses. And you can see, look at all that damage when it flies through the dummies, just by wandering around. But if I bring that guy out, he's going to get knocked out right away. If I bring out a minion, you can see he's getting knocked out right away as well. Shark, dead. And there you go. So, yeah, and you can see as soon as enemies are around, it does move a little faster, but it's still limited how fast it actually moves, and it does have a tendency to wander, which can leave you undefended if you're doing things other than fighting bosses. So very, very, very powerful, and ultimately the best thing against bosses, but not always the best thing in all situations. It is also like the Stardust Cell Staff. The Stardust Dragon Staff is also crafted from 18 Stardust Fragments from the Stardust Pillar at your Ancient Manipulator. So if you're gearing up for the Moonlord, you'll probably want to craft this one first, the Stardust Dragon Staff, because it's going to be very effective against the Moonlord. But ideally, you probably want to have them both. And that's basically that. But let's show you a couple of these against our dear friend, the Eye of Cthulhu. Alright, get him, boy. And that's all you needed to know right there. Stardust Dragon, very effective against bosses. Maybe not so effective against certain ones that move really, really fast, but as you can see, really took that out quickly. Let's compare that. We'll just kind of go backwards for this one. There you go. Those guys also doing lots of damage. Did he just take off on me? I think he did. Running away, eh? All right. Let's just resummon him then. Oh no, it still thinks he's here. I don't know. All right. Well, anyway, you get the idea. These guys will do a lot of damage as well. Generally going to be a little less effective against bosses. But, yeah, that totally just glitched out on me. But they'll get the job done, and very good against like larger invasions and that sort of thing. Anyway, you get the idea, and Xeno Staff is a similar idea. Some people even argue the Xeno Staff can be more effective than the Stardust Cells. I wouldn't say that myself. I think these guys will generally do a better job, but maybe certain situations. Anyway, hope you liked the video. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you next time. Bye for now.